This is Jagdeep Ahluwalia, the founding secretary of the Indo-American Chamber of Commerce. Today's webinar will be recorded and forwarded to all participants, and we may load it onto the Chamber website, iaccgh.com. We want to acknowledge Jasmeeta Singh and Swapan Dhairevan for helping organize the event, ICC for supporting it, and it's now my honor and privilege to introduce the president of ICC, Jasmeeta Singh. Jasmeeta is the president of the Indian Cultural Center. She has been with ICC since 2009 and very much involved in Indian and Punjabi communities. A UT graduate and a mother of 3 children, she enjoys being a KW realtor. She initiated the ICC COVID-19 local response initiatives and is helping the community fight the virus. Ladies and gentlemen, I invite Jasmeeta Singh, president of ICC, to make some welcome remarks.
Hi, thank you so much. Thank you, Mr. Ahluwalia, for giving India Culture Center this wonderful opportunity to work together. It's always a delight to work with you. A very good afternoon from ICC. My name is Jasmeeta Singh, and I'm the president of India Culture Center. A little bit about ICC. It's a non-profit organization to promote, educate, and unite India's enriched, diverse cultures and values to benefit and serve all communities of Greater Houston. I believe ICC is always promoting culture and has been for last 47 years. Although our mission is not to raise funds for disaster relief, but ICC is serving by donating thousands of masks to various city and Stafford Council members and delivering meals to Houston Police Department of different districts. And very much delighted to be part of this webinar with Indo-American Chamber of Commerce of Greater Houston as well. As you all know, these are uncertain and disturbing times, and the effect of COVID-19 pandemic has been truly global and touched us all in a significant manner. No one is spared from this COVID-19, and in these unimaginable times, one thing is certain, that we all are connected globally with each other, no matter where we are and no matter who we are. We thought it would be a great idea to bring one of the most well-liked and equally powerful elected official in our region, Commissioner Adrian Garcia. And he has been a friend of this community for years. And we are looking forward to know what is Harris County doing as the second largest county to mitigate the risks, and at the same time, what type of services they are offering to people who have lost businesses and day jobs, and most importantly, how they are planning to rebuild the communities in Harris County. We are all impacted by COVID-19, so let's come together to extend a helping hand to one another. And I know there are many organizations doing great work in that space, and we are glad that we are also contributing towards this effort. And I do want to thank in advance Commissioner Garcia, a dear family friend, a true leader, and during these challenging times of our communities. On behalf of ICC Board, ICC trustees, and all the ICC partnering organizations, I would like to welcome you all. Back to Jagdeep ji.
Thank you very much, Jasmeeta ji. We are all very honored to have the commissioner joining us. We, as Jasmeeta ji said, have known him for a long time, but it will be the privilege of the president of the chamber, Tarush Anand, who is the chairman of our board, to welcome you all on behalf of the chamber and introduce Commissioner Garcia. Tarush is an attorney by profession, a partner of the law firm of Brown Sims. He practices civil litigation and has represented a broad range of domestic and international businesses in various types of business disputes across the country. He has received several awards and honors over the years, including an AVM preeminent rating from Martindale-Hubbell and selection to the Texas Super Lawyers Rising Stars list for several years. Please join me in welcoming the president of IACCGH, Tarush Anand, to make the welcome remarks. On to you, Tarush. Thank you.
Thank you, Jagdeep. Good afternoon and welcome everyone. Thank you for joining us this afternoon for this wonderful webinar in our ongoing series addressing the COVID-19 issues. Today, it is my honor to introduce our guest, Commissioner Adrian Garcia. Commissioner Garcia, as many of you know, has devoted the past 35 years of his life to public service. He served the community starting as an HPD police officer, as director of the mayor's anti-gang office, as a member of Houston City Council, as mayor pro tem, as Harris County Sheriff, and now as a Harris County Commissioner. Commissioner Garcia's trailblazing efforts have served as a model nationally for the Sikh and other religious minority communities to serve in law enforcement while still observing the requirements of their faith. He's been a long-term friend of the Chamber of Commerce and the Indian American community. It is my honor and privilege to welcome Commissioner Adrian Garcia. Welcome.
Thank you, Darush, and good to see everyone and be on this call. Thank you so much for having me. It's an honor. I want to especially thank those in leadership, Jagdeep, Sanjay, Jasmita, Tarush, for all that they're doing for the community and for allowing me to be a part of today's occasion. It's a pleasure to be with you.
Tarush, are you ready for us to get started with our session?
I am.
All right, Commissioner, you're in perfect uniform for this occasion, and with your international handshake of Namaste, which seems to be the future of handshakes across the globe. If I may just go back 1 second to thank Tarush and maybe just embarrass him a little bit. He's not on video. On behalf of the board of the Indo-American Chamber of Commerce, ICC, and everybody that's part of the audience today, happy birthday, Tarush.
Thank you very much.
Happy birthday.
So, you know, Jasmita ji talked to us about how large Harris County is, how big the precinct is. Precinct 2 is also home to NASA Johnson Space Center and the Port of Houston, which we will get to. But the billion-dollar question that everybody is focused on is, of course, the coronavirus and COVID-19. So let's start with a 30,000-foot level look at it before we get into specific initiatives. It may just be a couple of months since we've been under the influence of the coronavirus, but it certainly feels like years. And you've been on the front lines, Commissioner Garcia, from day one. Tell us a little bit about the overall efforts, how things are in Harris County before we start going into details on each of those initiatives.
Thank you, Sanjay, for that. And yes, as you indicated, this may be the international handshake of the future. And please take add this to your attire as you go about your daily work. First of all, I want to make sure that we are all resisting the temptation to believe that we are past the pandemic, that we are in a recovery. The reality of it is that we are not. Here is my point of measure for it. Number one, we have had thousands of people being diagnosed as being COVID-19 positive. We have had several people as well being having recovered from COVID-19, which is incredible news. However, we have had hundreds of deaths as well in Houston, Harris County. That is incredibly unfortunate. To that end, our current measure is that number one, actually yesterday, Texas had its single largest spike in identified cases. Not Harris County, but Texas. Harris County, although has not seen any major significant or steady decline, we are at a plateau. So this tells me that we still are in the midst of the pandemic. We're not in recovery, and that at any given time, we can experience one of two things, and I hope it will be the latter. The first is that we will experience spikes. We don't want to see that happen. Second is that we could experience declines, which is what we must need to have happen in order for our economy to move forward. So the other side of it too is that some people have said to me, we haven't had the number of people die that we've had die in other states like New York. My response is, do you want to be one of those dead that gets discounted as not as many? One life lost to COVID-19 is one life too many, especially when we can be doing things to prevent it. So we have still ways to go. I launched a senior residential care facility task force to work with those facilities in my precinct. It is being led by the CEO of Baker Ripley. It is being led by the director of AARP of the Houston Harris County area. Also a retired epidemiologist from the City of Houston's Health Department, and Michael Moore, who was Mayor White's point person during Hurricanes Katrina, Rita, and Ike. They are all co-chairs to my task force, and we believe that their work will be of benefit to many or to all senior care facilities across Harris County. So we're doing things to ensure that we're moving forward. But again, the number one thing I want to emphasize is we're not in recovery, folks. We are still in the middle of the pandemic.
Thank you, Commissioner. I think it's keeping our eye on the ball to make sure we all hope that it's the latter where we start seeing a decline. And thank you for your efforts for our senior citizens who are the most vulnerable across the nation. There are some interesting things that you've done, which, a lot of the attention from the business community has been on the emergency disaster loan and the payroll protection program for the federal government, which were both stood up in a little bit of a hurry. And there were several that missed out, either were not qualified to apply for it or couldn't get their paperwork in time before the funds ran out. So talk to us about what you did for our small businesses in instituting a Harris County allocation of budget for funds. And just yesterday, hot off the press, I believe there was a $30 million authorization to help those that are most in need and the most vulnerable within our region. Thank you.
First of all, if you're a member of the Indian Culture Center of the Indo-American Chamber and you do not live in Harris County, you're missing out. We are leading in this effort. So to the first area of response, our first significant measure to provide support and relief and to keep our economy strong and relevant was the Small Business Forgivable Loan Program that I put together and had the support of my colleagues, at least two of my colleagues, to pass. And it was for $10 million from our contingency fund, not knowing whether it would be reimbursable through the CARES Act. Ultimately, it is reimbursable. So we'll be getting that money back. And I am already contemplating providing another tranche to that program. But it was $10 million forgivable loan, up to a $10 million allocation, but up to $25,000 per business they would be eligible for. It would be forgivable with effectively the threshold of staying in business for up to 5 years, keeping your employees, as many of your employees on the payroll would make you eligible to have that loan forgivable. I got the idea from the fact that when I was on city council, I saw what something as simple as a street construction project could do to a small business. That program was a true micro business program, which is essentially 5 employees, including the owner. This program, because we were thoughtful about trying to keep as many people on the payroll as possible, we wanted to flatten the unemployment curve. And so we've allowed for businesses with no more than 500 employees and no greater than 5 million in revenue to be able to apply for this loan. However, in the analysis of those who applied, we have found that we're hitting the mark that we intended to hit all along, and that is that 80% of the people who applied have 10 employees or less, and that their average annual revenue is no greater than $1 million. So this is helping true small businesses, micro businesses in the Houston-Harris County area. The other thing too was that 10 million in anybody's pocket would be a lot of money. But when we announced this program, within 2 hours, we had 7,000 applications with a request of approximately $152 million. We are already going through the disbursement of funds, and approximately over $3 million has already been approved of those who applied. I'm very excited about this. I want to make sure that we continue to move through this and make sure that as much money is allocated so that way I can have the justification to come back for another tranche. But I do want to say that of the businesses that applied or were allowed to apply, the number one criteria was that you needed to be a Harris County business. We found several that were from Fort Bend or Montgomery County. Sorry, guys, we're taking care of home first. And that you had to be in good standing with your Harris County taxes. Several people we found in the process. Sometimes you know of things, sometimes you don't. Nonetheless, we go through a review, and we found that several folks had to get some things taken care of. We gave them an opportunity to get in good standing, and that did not remove them out of the process. So we're very excited about where we've gone through. And then, as you indicated, Sanjay, just yesterday, we have approved $30 million, again, out of our contingency fund, to go to rental assistance, rental assistance. Now, on this one, we still don't know whether it's eligible, but we are making sure that when the best way to fight this pandemic is to stay at home, then obviously we cannot have evictions take place. We believe the $30 million will help approximately 20,000 people across Houston-Harris County. And the neat thing about our allocation is that the $30 million will be able to allow folks who were not eligible, for example, the City of Houston's program that used federally allocated dollars. Some folks were not eligible for that funding. Ours is local tax dollars, which will allow almost anyone to be eligible for that funding. The other thing too is that we added a social vulnerability index to our process. The whole program is still being stood up. We will be announcing the open for application process on June the 11th. But the social vulnerability index will allow us to be able to help those who are in greatest need for the assistance. And again, $30 million in anybody's pocket would be a lot of money. But the City of Houston's $15 million went in 45 minutes. So we can only assume that in less than 2 hours, our $30 million will be allocated.
So refreshing to hear that we are taking care of the most vulnerable in society, and the pandemic puts it pretty clearly to all of us that we are all in this together. And as a great man once said, how we take care of the most vulnerable in society is truly reflective of who we are as a people. Right. So thank you very much for doing that. And again, the challenges are tremendous. Now taking a little bit of a longer look into the future, because we hope to be on the other side of this pandemic. Right. And come back roaring. Like you said, we're not yet in recovery, but looking ahead, you were uniquely positioned, having served in HPD, on Houston City Council, as a Harris County sheriff, when you came into office as commissioner. And I am sure you had a ton of priorities that you had in mind coming into office. But just in the last 18 months, Harris County has been faced with the rain events, chemical explosions, the pandemic. How has that kind of changed priorities for you, and how do you get back on what you initially came in intending to do?
Well, I tell you what, I took great notice in 2009, actually in 2008, in the midst of the presidential election when the country was facing an incredible recession. And then Senator Kaine decided to suspend his campaign to work on that. Then Senator Obama was asked if he would suspend his campaign as well to focus on the recession. And he indicated he wouldn't, because a president would have to do many things at once. So coming in as a commissioner, I had a focus on education. I had a focus on economic development. I had a focus on public health. I had a focus on the quality of life. I had a focus on flood mitigation. I had a focus on community development. And then in March, we had an explosion. We had actually, prior to March, we had an explosion in Baytown with ExxonMobil. Then we had an explosion with ITC, which was the largest single chemical fire that Harris County had had in years. And it created an incredible amount of challenges. And then we had a barge, then we had a lightning strike. Then we had another explosion at Kimco. Then we had a barge hit I-10 and damage the freeway and cause challenges there. Then we had some barges collide in the ship channel. Then we had another explosion at Baytown. Then we had Imelda. And in the midst of all that, the public health department has gotten more money, because during the budgeting process, I worked to give the health department $9 million more than they asked for, because I knew the priority of public health. My work crews last year, in 1 year, did more linear feet of drainage system maintenance than the precinct had ever done before. And this year, we're on track to do 3 times more than has ever been done in this precinct. I came in with a public education policy advisor, and we have stood up a SAT, a free SAT program for aspiring college students in Precinct 2. We have worked to convene our area superintendents to support them in their efforts to ensure that our children are getting the best possible education. Just yesterday, I approved the first economic development rebate that Harris County has done in years. Great Wolf Lodge will now be constructing in the city of Webster, which is in Precinct 2. Yesterday, I approved the first increase in senior and disabled homestead exemption, the first one done since 2008. So we, in spite of the pandemic, in spite of the fires, the explosions, the collisions, the rain events, we are continuing to do many things to move our county and our economy forward and continue to make Harris County, not Fort Bend County, the best place to live, work, and raise a family. And coupled with the fact that prior to the pandemic, this attire that I am so honorably and proudly wearing was acquired in India. I was able to fit in a trade mission with the lovable Jagdeep, Sanjay, Jasmita and Bobby Singh, and meet with our counterparts or your counterparts in India while visiting New Delhi, Mumbai, Amritsar, and so many other places. But working to build those international economic relationships, cultural relationships, educational relationships, so that we can strengthen our community and our economy and build bridges so that we can move forward into the 22nd century as a much stronger community.
It's amazing, Commissioner. Looks like you've found a way to use all 24 hours of the day dealing with all kinds of curveballs that have been thrown while making sure the priorities that you had while you were coming into office also continue to make progress. And before we shift to the conversation on how Harris County positions itself for when we come out of the pandemic and how do we improve trade relations, if I could just go back to a couple of things. What has your experience been in terms of how your constituents, the residents of the region, have stepped up when faced with this crisis to make sure they are lending a helping hand?
Well, I'll tell you, there's been so many examples, Sanjay, and I am just so proud because, you know, if you recall during Hurricane Ike in particular, which created an incredible devastation to our electrical capacity, you could see electrical cords going from one neighbor's house to the other. So many people were doing so many things to lift each other up through that particular event. And Harris County residents have not lost the spirit. We are a can-do county. We are a in-it-together county, and we're seeing it. I'll just give you one beautiful example, and I think I have it right here. There's a senior brigade in my precinct that early on started to look at materials laying around one of our community facilities and says, you know what, maybe I can make a mask out of this. And so they began to quickly bring in sewing machines and get other materials together and assemble the seniors and quickly start to sew face coverings for our first responders, for our staff, and for so many. And then we've had donations come from so many places to support our medical team with the very, very hard to acquire N95 masks, the surgical masks, gloves, face shields, and the like. So many have dug into their own pocket to make these contributions. And you know, being the largest county in Texas, we're a little fortunate that our pockets are a little deeper. But in Precinct 2, I have 14 cities that have really depend on the county for a lot of things. And so as we received some of these donations, those donations were quickly sent over to those cities to support them and their first responders as well. People have been providing food, shelter, delivering food to our homebound seniors. There's just so many examples, Sanjay, that warms your heart. And that is what made this pandemic a very horrible experience, a very dangerous virus. It is that spirit in our community, no matter the walk of life, no matter what name they may call their God, no matter the color of their skin, no matter their language of origin, they have come together to support one another, and it's been beautiful to see.
It's gratifying to hear. And if we may boast about one of our chamber members who's actually headquartered in Webster, which I believe is in Precinct 2, Harris County. As you know, a good cross-section of the Indo-American community are healthcare professionals, doctors, folks in the sciences, and Ansh Labs, Gopal Sirjani's firm, has created an antibody test, which is going to be pretty critical as we come back to the new normal, if you will. And they have already donated to the city of Webster and looking to do more in our region. have the emergency use authorization from the US FDA, and could be a game changer, if you will, in how the region comes back, and certainly want to give a shout out to them. To our audience in the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen, if you've got questions, please type them in and we will get to them. We've already got a couple, but before we get to those questions from the audience, you alluded to focusing on education. Our graduating seniors have had one heck of a year. From your 35 years of experience and how your worldview, any advice for them? Maybe they're not on our call, but their parents probably are on our call.
Yes. Well, first I would say to the parents, we love you. We're thinking about you because I know that all of our hearts are breaking because our children cannot have that once of a lifetime experience of crossing the stage, getting that diploma, and having daddies and mommies embarrassing them with cheers and shouts and foghorns going off and whistles, and then having everybody over the house for an incredible dinner or lunch to celebrate their incredible milestone. They won't be able to go to the prom. And it is really sad. I'm trying to keep from choking up. So to the parents who have that senior at home, I just want to say to you that we're thinking about you. We're thinking about your sons and daughters. But I would also say to you that your children, because they're going through this situation, are likely to become that next medical professional, that next scientist that will cure viruses for all of mankind and for the future. Your children are likely to understand the significance of this pandemic and come up with the first homemade N95 mask. They'll be able to come up with a new sanitizer that will keep us healthy and safe. Your children are absorbing this situation, and they're recognizing that something needs to be done. And so through conversations with you, I know that they will be inspired to spread their wings and soar to phenomenal heights. All I ask of you is when they achieve that incredible success, tell them to come live in Precinct 2.
Fantastic. Never let a crisis go to waste. And
That's right.
This necessity might be the mother of invention that we will all need.
That's exactly right.
Two things before we get to international relations. While we have a pandemic, the show must still go on. We still have issues facing our region. We've got our state and our country. Thoughts on conversations that are going around on vote by mail and how Harris County, who is also in the process of having our clerk, resigning for health reasons. What are your thoughts on vote by mail and how the county is going to make sure that voting in November is made easy and safe?
Yeah, not only in November, it's going to be in July.
July, that's right.
We got a runoff to deal with in July. And so first, I just want to say to those of you who may know Dr. Troutman, we want to thank her for her leadership. She really transformed voting in Harris County with the implementation of county-wide voting centers, which now makes it feel like early voting throughout the election process. You don't have to vote in your neighborhood any longer like you used to years back. So we want to thank her, and we're going to miss her, but we also want her to be healthy and safe, so we understand the need for her to step down. I also made the nomination yesterday to appoint Chris Hollins as the interim county clerk. He will hold the reins until the end of the year, see us through this July runoff, and then the November election. This is one of the most significant elections because of so many different things this is 2020, the presidential election. And so we need to make sure that we have someone laser focused on the election process and making sure it goes well. And the reason I mention all that is because anyone seeking to replace Dr. Troutman as the office holder will have to go through an election themselves this year. And so we wanted to make sure that we had someone that wasn't going to be campaigning, but it was going to be very, very focused on ensuring that we have fair and open elections this year. To that end, we have approved $12 million to the county clerk's office so that vote by mail applications can be sent out to anyone who voted, who wants to vote in the runoff or the November election. There's still court battles going on in terms of that particular process, but also in recognizing COVID-19 or the pandemic as a disability, which would otherwise make you eligible for a vote by mail ballot. And so we're excited that we're making progress on that front. And we, again, want to make sure that everyone gets a chance to vote, but that they can vote safely if they feel concerned that showing up at the poll may expose them to the pandemic. So the vote by mail program will be robust. Everyone will be getting an application. If you want to vote by mail, you can simply fill it out and you'll get your ballot in the very near future. If you want to go to the poll, the polls will be open. But we just want to make sure that we're making this available to everyone as well.
Fantastic. Anybody that's tried to go around the region in the last 60 days has been pleasantly surprised with how well our freeways and toll roads function. No traffic. But we hope to come back to a time when there are a lot more people helping get the economy back on its 2 feet. Given the tremendous role that the county plays in transportation, where do you see the future of transportation in Harris County?
Well, I think this is it's going to be a very interesting future that we're going to see. We may get into, because of conversations that I've been having, we may see a future where we may see congestion be at an all-time low. And the reason I say that is because I've been talking to business leaders who have, for example, 1,700 employees across the country. And after surveying their employees and after reviewing their productivity during the pandemic, they have recognized that they have been as productive, if not more productive, during the pandemic with their work from home flexibility. And this business in particular is currently, during the pandemic, operating at about a 15% of their workforce working out of the office. They foresee that they may not get above 20% once the pandemic has been dealt with. I think many businesses are going to be seeing this. I think parents are finding a new relationship with their children now that they're having to do homeschooling. So it'll be very interesting to see what our culture, if you will dictate for businesses in the future. With that being said, it will enable us to rethink things like the I-45 expansion, whether it really needs to be expanded to the extent that the Texas Department of Transportation is initially indicating. It will help us rethink about providing other modes of transportation, multimodal forms of transportation, like hike and bike trails that people may want to use more than getting on the standard mass transportation. So there's going to be a lot of transformation, I believe, But the number one thing it's doing for us right now, and it speaks also to keeping the economy moving, is that with less vehicles on the roadway, we're filling those potholes a lot faster these days. And we're getting our construction done a lot faster. And so all of that, I think, speaks well to whenever we do get back to a full-fledged economy. And but I also want to say that I'm proud of Metro. Sanjay, you've been an integral part there. And I just want to say, because Metro has done a phenomenal job at making sure that they are maintaining user confidence in getting on a bus, on getting on our light rail system, on using the park and rides. And that's important because once we get out of this pandemic, with the stay-at-home experience, I think we have an opportunity to create newfound confidence in our public transportation systems and potentially have the ability to encourage people to look to it than getting back in their car and expending that fuel that they're not using right now, not creating that wear and tear on their vehicles like they're not doing right now. I think there will be a lot of households rethinking their approach to their lives, and I think public transportation could be a benefactor to that.
Thank you for the shout out, Commissioner. And nothing like a pandemic to show the importance of publicly funded transportation options. Not everybody has a luxury of a car, especially when incomes and job losses are mounting. So even to this day, there are 100,000 people that use public transport across Harris County during the pandemic because they got to get to their essential jobs. A lot of the conversation when you were in India centered on the Port of Houston, given it's the second largest port in domestic and foreign tonnage, and I believe now the largest port for foreign tonnage, and a critical part of how trade will flow. During your time on Houston City Council, you did a lot of work with broadening trade ties with China, and now we've had a renewed focus on India. How do you see the port fitting into this equation, and what do you see as avenues for improving relations between Texas, Harris County, and India?
Thank you for that. And as I mentioned earlier, I was very fortunate to be able to visit India for the first time. And we had incredible conversations with those that are now charged with building the port in Mumbai. And so, and those are important conversations for me and us to be in the middle of. And so the first thing I'll say is that I'm incredibly fortunate to be a county commissioner today. Although I love being a Houston City Council member, and you're right, I had an incredible opportunity and phenomenal visits to China. The unfortunate part of that is that there are term limits at the city of Houston. Back then, it was 3 two-year terms. And so when you work abroad, it's all about building trust and building a relationship. And you can't do that sometimes within your term limits. And now as a county commissioner, that although now the city of Houston has 2 4-year terms, commissioners have 4-year terms, commissioners have no term limits. And I think that is so critical to the success of building very, very important international relationships. I do want to applaud former County Judge Ed Emmett for his trips to India as well, along with the Chamber and Jagdeep. But I don't believe that the county has been at par with the city of Houston in making those international efforts. I want to change that. I need to change that, because as the commissioner who has the Port of Houston in my precinct, I'm committed to the deepening and widening of the Port of Houston. I'm committed to ensuring that the Port of Houston is welcoming to the mega vessels so that we can invite more foreign tonnage and domestic tonnage to come through the Port of Houston. I am committed to ensuring that when that tonnage arrives, that it gets to the shelves of our retail establishments as soon as humanly possible. But to that end, I want to make sure that India, in particular, and other countries as well, aren't looking to the port of Corpus Christi or New Orleans, or God forbid, Beaumont, or San Diego or LA or Miami. They've got to look to Houston as their primary point of destination. And so my focus is to follow up on the initial trip with more trips to India with a entourage of port commissioners and port business partners, so that we can make a true full-fledged effort to welcoming and embracing and inviting India to do trade through the Port of Houston. That is critical. And I think it's as one thing that we have found that in this pandemic is that we may not be known as the petrochemical capital of Texas or the country much longer. The price of oil has plummeted during this pandemic, and it's going to have a slow recovery if it ever gets back near the $100 barrel mark that we once had. So that tells me that we're going to have to make more aggressive efforts to diversify our economy here locally. So that will be front and center for me. That's what I'll be working on. And I will be looking to work with the business leaders on this webinar to create those conversations and think through those strategies that would be good news to our friends abroad. And as I'll close on that point, again, I want to mention that yesterday I led the first economic development rebate that Harris County has done. City of Houston has done several, but Harris County has done very few over its years. And I'm proud that I was able to convince my colleagues to support it. But this tells me that we can do more, and we ought to do more.
Fantastic. And if I may, Commissioner, when you go back on your next trip post-pandemic in this attire, you may find business opportunities both with the Port of Houston, but they may be looking at you in Bollywood for what you could do for them. We've got several questions from the audience. The travel industry has been particularly hit hard. How does pretty much close to zero business and revenue, how do they avail of this program, particularly for businesses that are headquartered in Harris County?
Well, first of all, let me just say that the program that we put forth, as I mentioned, has 7,000 applicants in it. And as I indicated, my desire is to come back and do another tranche once we get the first 10 million effectively dealt with. As we were on this call, I've gotten a briefing, and we've gotten actually over 3 million that has been approved. It's 3 million, which is a lot of money, but it's not the 10 million. So I want to make sure we get through that as quickly as possible. And if you were an applicant, an early applicant in that small business program, then number one, you're being worked through, then I hope that you will be an ultimate benefactor to the resources. And then hopefully if we get through that and I add some more money to it, if you're lower in the ranking or in the listing, then we'll get to you with the new amount. But remember, we did 10 million. My hope is to put somewhere between 30 and 50 million more into it. That would only be 40 or 60 million that we would be putting in it it's still not the 152 million that was initially asked. But we'll be thinking through other ways to support our economy and our business owners. So we're all thinking on creative ways to add maybe a subsequent program that may be an opportunity for people to apply there. I have heard, and let me just tout the successes of our program real quickly as it compares to what you said earlier, Sanjay, about the PPP program. Number one, I was proud of the fact that our website did not crash, even with the amount of pressure that we got, in contrast to the SBA's website regretfully crashed at the time of the application for the PPP. Additionally, as you mentioned, several tiers of businesses have been deemed ineligible for the PPP. And more feedback has been given to me about not being eligible for the PPP than those being eligible for it. So it just tells me, it reemphasizes that we have to continue to look at this. There's a lot of hurt taking place, and we need to do more, and especially in the travel sector, because Houston is a great place to live, work, and raise a family. But remember, we're not a true destination town. We're not Miami, we're not San Diego, we're not New York, we're not LA. We are a business town. And so if people are having concerns about traveling to Houston to do business, we hope that the business will continue via Zoom, but there's nothing like a face-to-face meeting that you can close a deal with. And so for that reason, people need to have confidence in our hotels, in our airlines, in our Uber drivers. So we have to make sure that we're thinking about how to support all areas of our travel sector.
Thank you, Commissioner. We've got a couple more questions. I'm going to try and roll them together in the interest of time, if I could, particularly relating to property tax, flooding, efforts that the county has taken to avoid flooding in Kingwood, given the high property tax base in Kingwood being one, and the other is on property tax valuations. The increases in 2019 had a significant impact on economic viability, and now combined with COVID-19, rents obviously aren't increasing. They're probably going to be decreasing. There are restrictions on evictions, foreclosures. How do we navigate ourselves through all of this?
Well, let me just start with that one first. And that is to say that, remember, I have proposed and my colleagues unanimously supported a senior homestead exemption increase. First one since 2008. So seniors 65 plus, those with medical disabilities will be eligible for this exemption. You still need to make sure that you are enrolled in those exemptions. It's interesting, Sanjay, that I found that there are many seniors that fit, or individuals and homeowners that fit that category that do not know that they're eligible for these exemptions. So please go to HCAD and determine whether you're eligible, assuming you live in Harris County. But to the broader conversation of property values, I also proposed a resolution, which is right now the only power we've got, a resolution disagreeing with the Attorney General's opinion to HCAD. Now, this one was a 3-2 vote. My two Republican colleagues did not support the resolution. They just didn't want to go against the or be on record for disagreeing with the Attorney General. And my position is it's not partisan. I'm disagreeing with the Attorney General because of all constituents of Harris County. And the basis of that resolution is the fact that the Attorney General has taken the position that COVID-19 is not a real property disaster. unlike a flood. So I take exception to that, and also coupled with the fact that the governor extended our ability to conduct a runoff election, extended the deadline for elected officials to submit certain reports. The president extended our deadline to submit our income tax returns. But the governor did not extend the deadline so that you can protest your property tax valuations. So the resolution was in hopes of getting their attention that we have to revisit this issue and think about the impact that COVID-19 has had to real property in this regard. Number one, COVID-19 was in Texas and in Harris County before January the 1st. And I mentioned January the 1st because that's when the HCAT does its property valuations. Secondly, the unemployment rate is at an all-time high, alike it would be during a major disaster like Allison or Katrina, Rita, and Ike, and Imelda and Harvey. So something has put people out of work, and it will, and it's disabling them from meeting their tax obligations, their property tax obligations. So I think that while we don't have the ability to impact this directly, my resolution, I hope, will carry a strong message that we have to revisit this.
Commissioner, we want to be respectful of your time and that of our audience. One last question, if we could. This is an audience, obviously, that cares about community. So the question is, what are the top needs in Harris County, and how can we as citizens help?
Well, we're going to have many. So I would say, number one, that if you're able to continue your business operations, congratulations, and we're excited for you. But think about how you can employ those who have been impacted by COVID-19. If you can reinvent some of your business operations so that you can hire folks, even at a part-time basis, please help us think through that. We have to get people off the unemployment rolls as quickly as possible in order to continue to move us forward. Secondly, like the resident in Webster that Sanjay was making reference, who's invented a antibody test. I'm proud that he lives in precinct 2. So if you got great ideas like that, please come visit with us. If we can help, we'll make all of our teams available, our public health director, if it's something that's medically related, our economic development director. But we are going to need creative ideas to really make the recovery process much shorter than the pandemic, so that we will remain relevant in the global economy.
Well, thank you very much, Commissioner, for your time, for your leadership, a steady hand in leading Harris County through these unprecedented times. Let me turn this over to the one and only Jagdeep Ahluwalia.
Before you do, Jagdeep, let me just very quickly say that I have been familiar with the beautiful Indian and Sikh community for many years. You have introduced me and shared so abundantly your delicious food. Why did I have to go to India to find kulfi? Y'all been holding back. Y'all were holding back. Jasmita, I'm talking to you. You guys could have shared kulfi with me a long time ago.
Yes, and the party.
I'm writing that one down.
Thank you, Commissioner. I would also like to mention that I want to acknowledge Bobby Singh.
Yes.
As one of the drivers behind putting together the delegation. He was the one who worked with the chamber very closely to create the delegation. And I want to acknowledge IACC India. If you recall our meeting with Rajalakshmi Rao, the national president of IACC India, and Kamal Vora, their Secretary General. I have, with Sanjay, been in a constant conversation with India to move the needle forward on all the discussions we had when we were there. Unfortunately, because of the pandemic, things kind of slowed down. But I talked to Rajalakshmi Rao and Kamal yesterday. They were trying to send a message across, but we've been having some technical difficulties. But we will set up a continuous dialogue with them to make sure that we can leverage the Port of Houston to our advantage, to share the knowledge and the equipment that we can support and supply India with, because exports is going to be a major determinant of how we move forward in this global economy. And being home to the largest US international port, we have a lot of know-how that we can leverage and sell. And we have a lot of equipment we can source for them. So I see a lot of potential for this new port that's coming in that we discussed in our meeting in Mumbai. And a lot of the other leads that were created, we are working very actively. We will also be involving the Greater Houston Partnership in this continued relationship because we have a long-term relationship with both the GHP and with IICC India and the PhD Chamber in Delhi and the CII with their Washington office. So we have 21 years of relationships that are available to the Port of Houston, to NASA for its innovation, to the Texas Medical Center, because the next biggest thrust is going to be on relationship building between the healthcare industry in India and the USA for testing, for equipment, and for sharing best practices from both sides. Because India, in its own way, has its own level of knowledge. I remember 12, 13 years ago when we took John Mendelsohn, the then head of MD Anderson, to India, he came back with the feeling that they were as good or great in what they do. And they managed to do it with 1/10 the resources. So there's a lot of potential because we are proud to be living in Harris County. We are proud to be led by leaders like you who have a vision. We are proud to have Mayor Turner as the mayor of the city of Houston. And we have neighbors in Fort Bend. So we live in a very good region, which can attract a lot of inbound investment, but more important, create a lot of outbound exports, which is part of what the Chamber's agenda is. It is part of your agenda to create local economic empowerment. With that, I want to hand over to the Secretary of the ICC. I want to once again thank Jasmeeta Singh, the President of ICC, for partnering with us for today's event. But I want to hand over to Santosh Verma, the Secretary of the ICC. He's lived in the Greater Houston area since 2000 and has been active in promoting culture and education in organizations such as ICC and the Bihar Association. I'm myself a Bihari Sardar from Ranchi, so it's a privilege to have Santosh Verma propose the vote of thanks. On to you, Santosh ji.
Yeah, good afternoon to all our valued guests, ladies and gentlemen, and everybody who is attending today's webinar on COVID-19. It is my privilege to propose a vote of thanks on this occasion, and I, on behalf of India Culture Center and all the supporting organizations, and on my behalf, thank Commissioner Adrian Garcia for agreeing to do this insightful webinar. I extend a very hearty note of thanks for the important work that you're doing in Harris County on the COVID-19 pandemic and all that you shared with us and all your work today. But a special big thank you also to you on the support to the senior citizens because they are the most vulnerable in the pandemic. And again, a big thank you for the Small Business Forgivable Loan Program. That's going to be very, very important. And I also wish to express my gratitude to the presidents of IA-CCGH, Mr. Tarush Anand, and ICC, Mrs. Jasmeeta Singh, to joining hands and bringing this important webinar for the benefit of the residents of the Harris County. And my thanks to Mr. Jagdeep Alwalia, the Executive Director of IA-CCGH, for his continuous support for this webinar, Mr. Sanjay Ramabhadran for his excellent coordination of the webinar. And finally, I'll take this opportunity to the Chamber of Commerce for the online logistics support to make this event go very smoothly and without interruption. Now, India Culture Center, by the way, has taken several initiatives, and special thanks to its executive committee, the board, and the members, and its partnering organizations who have become very active in helping the society through service and donations, and obviously while maintaining social distancing rules. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Santoshi. So before we sign off, again, on behalf of the Chamber, I want to thank ICC one more time, Sanjay for moderating the discussion, and of course, our superhero, Commissioner Garcia, who I always remember as Sheriff Garcia, who has been showing up at our gala for as long as I can remember in his very handsome uniform. And I agree with Sanjay that
got a new uniform.
So we hope we don't lose him to the film industry, but with the great work he's doing, we really need him here. I do want to thank Bhavna from the Chamber, who's done all the logistics. I do want to apologize for my delay getting on. I'm having some technical issues with my equipment. I have ordered a new webcam. Believe it or not, every day I get a message, it's going to come tomorrow, and tomorrow never comes. So I'm hoping it'll be here tomorrow. We do have another event this evening for the next generation. So I'm going to request Bhavna to put the slide up for your view. Everybody who's on this webinar is welcome to sign up for that if you already haven't. We have a young wealth management professional talking about how to manage your wealth. And then on May the 22nd, we have an extremely important webinar where Senator John Cornyn will be talking to 4 Texas-based businessmen from different cities across Texas on what is happening in their neck of the woods and how they can help with their business growth. And then Ambassador Taranjit Singh Sandhu, India's ambassador to the USA, will be talking about strengthening the US-India relations. And we have invited our advisors, the Consul General of India, Bob Patel of Lyondell-Bissell, Dr. David Lebron of Rice University, Durga Agarwal of Piping Technology, Dr. Renu Khator of the University of Houston System, Vijay Guradia, and representing Dr. Plotman from Baylor College, we have Dr. Bala Subramaniam, who was on a previous webinar with us, giving the ambassador an update on what is happening in their areas of expertise in this pandemic. Again, that's an open event. You're all welcome to go to the ISCCGH website to sign up. I'm asking Bhavna to please put up the last slide with our contact information. And with that, once again, I want to thank all of the participants who have joined us for today's webinar for helping make this webinar a success. I wish you all the best. Be safe, and see you at our next webinar. Thank you very much and good evening.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jagdeep.
Thank you.
Everyone be safe. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner.